Red and blue lights fractured the quiet suburban night, reflecting off the polished hood of a $100,000 luxury sedan. In the driver's seat sat a man who dictated the law of the state. At his window stood a rookie cop, determined to teach him a brutal lesson. The dashboard clock of the midnight blue 2025 BMW 7 Series read 11:42 p.m. Inside the sound-dampened cabin, the soft, melancholic notes of a Miles Davis trumpet solo drifted through the premium speakers. The Honorable Desmond T. Caldwell exhaled a long, slow breath, finally allowing the tension of the past 3 days to bleed from his broad shoulders. At 62 years old, Desmond was a man forged by decades of relentless pressure. He had fought his way from the gritty, underfunded public defender's office in downtown Chicago to the polished mahogany benches of the state Supreme Court. Tonight, however, he was not Justice Caldwell. He was just a tired man driving home. He loosened the knot of his charcoal gray Tom Ford silk tie and adjusted his grip on the leather steering wheel. The BMW was a recent indulgence, a quiet celebration of his 30th wedding anniversary with his wife, Evelyn. They lived in Blackwood Hills, an affluent, heavily gated enclave nestled in the quiet, rolling topography just outside the city limits. The roads here were lined with ancient, sprawling oak trees and illuminated by soft, amber street lamps that cast long, peaceful shadows. Less than a mile away, tucked out of sight behind a thick cluster of evergreen shrubs at the intersection of Elmwood and Crestview, sat Patrol Unit 412. Inside the cruiser, Officer Bradley Mitchell tapped his fingers impatiently against his steering wheel. At 26, Mitchell was a man running out of patience with his own life. He had been a star linebacker in high school, a local hero who never quite managed to make the leap to college ball. He had joined the police academy seeking the respect and authority he felt he was owed. 2 years into the job, the reality of writing, parking citations, and responding to noise complaints had severely bruised his ego. He desperately wanted a promotion to the tactical unit, and to get there, he needed a high-profile bust. He needed a win. Mitchell's eyes, heavy with boredom, scanned the empty road. Then, the sleek, elongated silhouette of the BMW glided past his hiding spot. Mitchell's radar gun remained silent. The vehicle was traveling at exactly 35 miles per hour. There was no erratic swerving, no broken taillights, no expired tags. But as the car passed beneath the glow of the street lamp, Mitchell caught a fleeting glimpse of the driver, an older black man in a neighborhood where the median property value hovered around $4 million. In the dark, quiet theater of Mitchell's mind, a prejudiced narrative instantly took root. He recalled a briefing from 2 days ago, a ring of car thieves targeting high-end luxury vehicles in the Tri-County area. The suspects were described as young, organized, and exclusively targeting Audi SUVs. None of these facts aligned with the man currently driving the BMW sedan. Yet, Mitchell felt the familiar, toxic rush of adrenaline. He convinced himself he was looking at a thief who had just scored the jackpot. Mitchell threw the cruiser into drive, his tires biting into the gravel as he pulled out onto the asphalt. He didn't activate his lights or sirens. He wanted to stalk. He wanted to build a case. Up ahead, Desmond glanced in his rearview mirror. He noted the distinct, blocky outline of a police cruiser sliding into his lane, maintaining a distance of about 3 car lengths. A familiar, weary knot tightened in Desmond's stomach. He had spent his entire life navigating the razor-thin line of being a black man in America. The robes of a Supreme Court justice offered absolute immunity in the courtroom. But out here, in the dark, behind the wheel of a luxury car, he knew exactly what he was. He was a target. Desmond maintained his speed. He signaled deliberately before changing lanes to let the cruiser pass. The cruiser did not pass. It mirrored his maneuver. Standard procedure. Desmond whispered to himself, a mantra he had repeated 100 times over the decades. Stay calm. Keep your hands visible. For 2 agonizing miles, the cruiser tailed him. Every time Desmond signaled and turned onto a smaller, more residential street leading toward Magnolia Estates, the cruiser followed. Mitchell was running the license plate through his onboard computer. The system lagged, buffering on the slow local network. Impatient, and fueled by a completely fabricated sense of righteous suspicion, Mitchell decided he didn't need to wait for the system. The vehicle crossed over a faint yellow line on a tight curve, a minor, almost imperceptible drift. It was all the excuse Mitchell needed. He slapped the dashboard panel. The light bar erupted in a blinding strobe of crimson and sapphire, and the siren let out a sharp, aggressive whoop-whoop. Inside the BMW, Desmond let out a heavy sigh that fogged the chilled glass of his window for a fraction of a second. He smoothly engaged his right turn signal, decelerated, and pulled the heavy vehicle onto the shoulder, parking precisely under the harsh, white glare of a halogen street lamp. He shifted the car into park, turned off the engine, and rolled down his driver's side window. Decades of legal expertise and sheer survival instinct kicked in. Desmond unbuckled his seatbelt, rolled down the window, turned on the interior dome light to illuminate the cabin, and placed both of his large, steady hands at the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel. He waited. In the rearview mirror, he watched Officer Mitchell step out of the cruiser. Mitchell's posture was rigid, his shoulders squared, walking with an exaggerated swagger. His right hand hovered aggressively close to the butt of his holstered Glock. "Here we go," Desmond murmured, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. Mitchell approached the vehicle cautiously, sweeping his high-powered LED flashlight across the trunk and the back seats before shining it directly into the driver's side window. The beam hit Desmond's face, blinding him instantly. Desmond did not flinch, nor did he raise a hand to shield his eyes. Doing so could be misinterpreted as a sudden movement. "License and registration." "Now," Mitchell barked, his voice dripping with an unwarranted hostile authority. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't state his name or his reason for the stop. "Good evening, officer," Desmond replied, his tone even, cultured, and perfectly modulated. "My driver's license is in my wallet, which is located in the left breast pocket of my suit jacket. The vehicle registration is in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" Mitchell squinted behind the glare of his flashlight. The precise, educated vocabulary irritated him. In Mitchell's worldview, suspects were supposed to be nervous, stuttering, or defensive. Desmond's absolute calm felt like an insult. It felt like defiance. "Don't play games with me, pal," Mitchell snapped, leaning closer to the window. "I said license and registration. Just hand them over. I am merely informing you of their location, so there are no misunderstandings when I reach for them," Desmond stated, maintaining his iron-clad composure. Slowly, telegraphing every millimeter of his movement, Desmond reached into his tailored suit jacket with his left hand, retrieved his leather wallet, and extracted his driver's license. He handed it through the window. Mitchell snatched the plastic card. He barely looked at the name Desmond T. Caldwell. He just looked at the address. "Magnolia Estates." "Whose car is this?" Mitchell asked, his voice adopting a mocking, condescending lilt. He shone his flashlight over the pristine, cream-colored leather interior, the brushed aluminum trim, the custom digital dashboard. "It is my vehicle," Desmond replied. "Yeah? You sure about that?" Mitchell scoffed. "You live in Magnolia Estates?" "As the address on my license indicates. Yes, I do." "What do you do for a living, Desmond?" Mitchell asked, deliberately omitting the title of Mr. in a subtle display of disrespect. "I work for the state," Desmond answered carefully. He had always believed in the purity of the law. He refused to use his title as a get-out-of-jail-free card. He wanted to be treated with the basic dignity afforded to any citizen, not just a Supreme Court justice. It was a matter of profound principle to him. "The state, huh?" Mitchell sneered. "Like the DMV? Or maybe sanitation?" Desmond's jaw tightened infinitesimally. "I work in the judicial branch, officer." Mitchell. Desmond had caught the name stamped into the silver badge on the officer's chest. "Right. Okay. Step out of the car." Mitchell ordered suddenly, taking a step back and unlatching the thumb brake on his holster. Desmond froze. His hands remained firmly glued to the steering wheel. "Officer Mitchell, I have provided my identification. I have broken no traffic laws. Could you please articulate your reasonable, articulable suspicion for ordering me out of my vehicle?" It was the exact phrase, the precise legal terminology outlined in Pennsylvania v. Mims, the Supreme Court case that governs an officer's right to order a driver out of a car. To a seasoned cop, it would have been a red flag that they were dealing with a lawyer. To Bradley Mitchell, it sounded like a criminal trying to be a smart aleck. "I don't have to articulate a damn thing to you," Mitchell shouted, his temper flaring, completely losing control of the professional interaction. "I matched this vehicle to a description of a stolen car in the area. Now step out of the vehicle before I drag you out." It was a blatant, provable lie, and Desmond knew it instantly. But Desmond also knew the lethal reality of the pavement. The side of the road at midnight was not a courtroom. There was no judge, no jury, no due process. There was only a heavily armed, highly agitated young man with a badge. "I am complying, officer." "I am unbuckling my seatbelt," Desmond said, his voice remaining agonizingly calm. "I am stepping out of the vehicle." Desmond opened the heavy door and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. He was a tall man, standing 6'2", with a commanding, dignified presence. Even in the harsh light of the police strobes, he looked every bit the distinguished statesman. But Mitchell saw only a threat. The moment Desmond's expensive leather loafers touched the asphalt, Mitchell grabbed him. The officer's rough hands violently seized Desmond by the shoulder of his Tom Ford suit, spinning him around with entirely unnecessary force. Desmond was slammed chest first against the side of his own car. The impact knocked the wind out of him, the cold metal biting through his shirt. "Spread your legs!" Mitchell yelled, kicking Desmond's left ankle hard to force his feet apart. Desmond gasped, a spike of sharp pain shooting up his leg. "Officer, you are making a catastrophic mistake," Desmond gritted out, his cheek pressed against the cold glass of the rear window. "I urge you to call your supervisor immediately." "Shut your mouth!" Mitchell spat. He grabbed Desmond's wrists, twisting them behind his back with vicious torque. The unmistakable, terrifying sound of heavy steel ratchets echoed in the night air. Click, click, click. The handcuffs clamped down tight over Desmond's wrists, pinching the skin. Mitchell squeezed them an extra notch, ensuring they would leave deep, purple bruises. "You're under arrest for suspicion of grand theft auto and failure to comply with a lawful order," Mitchell recited, panting slightly, high on the adrenaline of his own fabricated power trip. He patted Desmond down roughly, pulling the wallet from his pocket and tossing it onto the hood of the BMW. Desmond Caldwell, a man who had authored groundbreaking opinions on civil rights, a man who dined with governors and senators, found himself chained and humiliated on the side of a road, treated like a rabid animal. A cold, absolute fury began to crystallize in his chest. But his face remained an unreadable mask. He would not give this boy the satisfaction of his fear or his anger. He would save it for the courtroom. Mitchell grabbed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, Unit 412. I have a 10 to 15. Suspect in custody. Send a flatbed wrecker to my location to impound a stolen vehicle. And send me a backup unit. I've got a hostile." "Copy that. 412. Dispatcher Nancy Higgins' voice crackled back through the radio. "Backup is 2 minutes out. Sergeant Rourke is en route." Mitchell let go of Desmond and leaned against his cruiser, crossing his arms and grinning. "Thought you could outsmart me with your big words, huh? We've been looking for you guys all week. You're going away for a long time, old man." Desmond turned his head slightly, locking eyes with the young officer. The sheer intensity and unwavering confidence in Desmond's gaze made Mitchell falter for a fraction of a second. It wasn't the look of a caught thief. It was the look of an apex predator, patiently waiting for the trap to spring. "Officer Mitchell," Desmond said softly, the baritone of his voice cutting through the hum of the idling police cruiser. "I want you to remember everything you have done, and everything you have said over the last 5 minutes. Because I assure you, I will. Yeah. Tell it to the judge, Mitchell scoffed, turning his face away to hide a sudden, inexplicable prickle of unease. Less than 90 seconds later, the low rumble of a heavy engine announced the arrival of backup. An unmarked black Ford Explorer SUV pulled up behind Mitchell's cruiser, its hidden strobe lights flashing silently. The door opened, and Sergeant Thomas Rourke stepped out. Rourke was 55, a seasoned veteran of the force with graying temples and a deep, grooved face that had seen every tragedy and triumph the county had to offer. He was a meticulous, by-the-book cop who was counting the days to his pension. He did not like rookies who played cowboy. "What do we have here, Mitchell?" Rourke asked, his voice a tired grumble as he walked toward the scene, a heavy maglite swinging in his hand. "Got the luxury car thief, Sarge," Mitchell beamed, puffing out his chest. "Caught him dead to rights. He tried to pull some legal mumbo-jumbo on me, refused to step out of the vehicle. I had to use physical compliance to subdue him." "Is that right?" Rourke muttered, shining his flashlight toward the BMW. The beam swept over the pristine car, over the wallet resting on the hood, and finally landed on the suspect standing handcuffed against the back door. The beam of light hit Desmond Caldwell's face. Sergeant Rourke stopped dead in his tracks. The heavy flashlight in his hand trembled, the beam visibly shaking on the asphalt. All the color instantly drained from Rourke's weathered face, leaving him looking like a man who had just seen a ghost. His stomach plummeted into freefall. He didn't need to look at the driver's license. He recognized the man instantly. 3 years ago, Rourke had received a commendation at a statewide banquet. The man who had pinned the medal on his chest was currently standing in handcuffs, bleeding slightly from where the steel bit into his wrists. "Mitchell," Rourke breathed out, his voice suddenly hollow, echoing with the horrifying realization of the apocalypse that had just been unleashed upon their department. "Mitchell, what the hell have you done?" The silence that fell over the intersection of Elmwood and Crestview was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic, mocking flash of the red and blue strobes. Sergeant Thomas Rourke stood frozen, his breath pluming in the crisp autumn air. The maglite in his hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. He stared at the distinguished, gray-haired man pinned against the BMW, the man whose wrists were bound by cheap steel, and felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "Sarge?" Officer Bradley Mitchell asked, his arrogant smirk faltering as he registered his superior's ashen complexion. "What's wrong? I got him right here. Suspect is secured." Rourke finally found his voice. It came out as a harsh, breathless rasp. "Take them off. Take the cuffs off him right now, Mitchell." Mitchell blinked, thoroughly confused. "What? Sarge, no. This guy was driving a stolen vehicle. He resisted. I said take the damn cuffs off." Rourke roared, the sudden explosion of sound echoing off the quiet suburban houses. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, shoving Mitchell aside with a violent jolt of his shoulder. "Give me your keys. Now." Stunned by the physical rebuke, Mitchell fumbled at his duty belt, his fingers suddenly clumsy. He unclipped his universal handcuff key and handed it over, his mind frantically trying to process the sudden shift in reality. Rourke stepped up to Desmond Caldwell. The veteran sergeant's hands were visibly shaking as he reached behind the older man's back. "Your Honor," Rourke said, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound respect and absolute terror. "I am so incredibly sorry. Please, let me get these off you." Click, click. The steel jaws released. Desmond brought his arms forward slowly, wincing as the blood rushed back into his hands. Deep, angry red indentations circled his wrists, already beginning to purple at the edges. He rubbed them methodically, his face a portrait of stony, terrifying calm. He did not look at Rourke. He looked directly at Mitchell. Mitchell felt the air leave his lungs. "Your Honor? A Sarge—" Mitchell stammered, stepping back, his hand dropping away from his firearm as if it had suddenly turned red-hot. "What do you mean, Your Honor? This guy is a car thief. I matched the profile." "Shut your mouth, Bradley. Not another word." Rourke snapped, turning his head to glare at the rookie. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" "This is Justice Desmond T. Caldwell. He sits on the state Supreme Court. And this," Rourke gestured wildly to the pristine BMW, "is his home address. He lives 3 streets over." The words hit Mitchell like physical blows. A cold, nauseating dread bloomed in his chest, spreading rapidly to his extremities. He looked at the man he had just physically assaulted, the man he had mocked, the man he had threatened to drag out of a car, a state Supreme Court justice. Mitchell's knees went weak. The authority he had wrapped himself in just moments ago evaporated, leaving him exposed, foolish, and entirely ruined. He had not just crossed a line, he had sprinted past it and set fire to his own career. "Justice Caldwell," Rourke pleaded, turning back to Desmond. The sergeant actually removed his uniform hat, holding it against his chest. "I cannot express the depth of my apologies. This officer is a rookie. He made a catastrophic error in judgment. I will personally see to it that he is reprimanded." Desmond finally stopped rubbing his wrists. He adjusted the cuffs of his ruined Tom Ford shirt, then calmly picked up his wallet from the hood of the car. He slid it back into his breast pocket with deliberate, agonizing slowness. "Sergeant Rourke, is it?" Desmond asked, his voice returning to its perfectly modulated, gravelly baritone. "Yes, sir. Tom Rourke. Sergeant Rourke. An error in judgment is writing a citation for a broken taillight when it is merely dirty," Desmond stated, his words cutting through the night air like a scalpel. "What occurred here tonight was not an error. It was an unconstitutional detainment, a battery under color of law, and a blatant fabrication of probable cause." Mitchell, pale and sweating, tried to salvage the unsalvageable. "Sir, I thought the car was stolen. The profile." "Do not speak to me," Desmond commanded. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer force of his authority slammed Mitchell's mouth shut. Desmond turned his piercing gaze back to the sergeant. "Sergeant Rourke, I want Officer Mitchell's badge number, your badge number, and the name of your precinct captain. I also want it on the official record that I am requesting the preservation of all body-worn camera footage, dashcam footage, and radio dispatch audio from this evening. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. I will secure the footage myself," Rourke promised, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Furthermore," Desmond continued, his tone devoid of any heat, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying, "I am not interested in an informal reprimand. I am interested in the law. Officer Mitchell informed me I was under arrest for grand theft auto. Does that charge still stand?" "No, sir. Absolutely not," Rourke said instantly. "You are free to go. We will clear the scene immediately." Desmond nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. "Very well. Expect to hear from my legal counsel, as well as the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, by tomorrow morning. Good evening, Sergeant." Without sparing a second glance at the trembling rookie, Desmond opened the door to his BMW, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The quiet hum of the luxury vehicle sounded like a death knell to Mitchell. The BMW pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the tree-lined avenues of Magnolia Estates, leaving the 2 officers standing in the harsh glare of their own emergency lights. Rourke turned to Mitchell. The veteran cop's eyes were dead. "Get in your cruiser, Mitchell," Rourke said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet whisper. "Drive back to the precinct. Do not pull anyone over. Do not speak on the radio. Park the car, and go wait in the holding area." "Sarge, please," Mitchell begged, his voice cracking. "It was a mistake. I just wanted a good bust." "You just arrested the man who wrote the state guidelines on police use of force," Rourke replied flatly. "You're done, kid. You're completely done." The fluorescent lights of the 42nd Precinct bathed the bullpen in a sickly, green-tinged pallor. It was 2:15 a.m. The usual low hum of night shift banter was entirely absent. Instead, a suffocating silence hung heavy in the air, thick with rumor and impending doom. In a small, windowless interview room at the end of the hall, Bradley Mitchell sat hunched over a metal table. He had been stripped of his duty belt, his firearm, and his badge. He wore only his uniform trousers and a gray undershirt, shivering slightly despite the stuffy heat of the room. Panic makes people do foolish things. Arrogance makes them do fatal things. Left alone for an hour, Mitchell's fear had metastasized back into a desperate, feral self-preservation. He had convinced himself that it was his word against the judge's. He reasoned that if he just stuck to his guns, if he painted Caldwell as aggressive and non-compliant, the union would have to back him. He had requested a pen and an incident report form, frantically scribbling a narrative that strayed violently from reality. Suspect was hostile upon approach, Mitchell wrote, his handwriting jagged. Suspect refused lawful commands to identify himself. Suspect made sudden, aggressive movements toward his jacket pocket, prompting a justifiable use of physical restraint to ensure officer safety. The heavy metal door clicked open, interrupting his desperate fiction. Chief of Police Harrison Miller walked in. Miller was a mountain of a man, a 30-year veteran who had spent the last decade trying to drag his department into the modern era of community policing. Following close behind him was Captain Robert Davies from Internal Affairs, holding a sleek, silver tablet. Neither man looked angry. They looked deeply, profoundly exhausted. "Chief," Mitchell started, immediately sitting up straight. "Listen, I was just finishing my report. I know who the guy turned out to be. But out there on the street, he was non-compliant." He reached into his coat. "Stop," Chief Miller said. The single word hit the room like a physical shockwave. Miller pulled out a metal chair and sat down opposite Mitchell, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "Put the pen down, Bradley." Mitchell swallowed hard, dropping the plastic pen. It clattered loudly on the metal table. "Captain Davies," Miller said, not taking his eyes off the young officer. "Would you please enlighten Mr. Mitchell as to the current situation?" Captain Davies placed the tablet on the table, sliding it so the screen faced Mitchell. "We just got off a conference call with the mayor, the district attorney, and the state attorney general," Davies began, his voice dry and clinical. "We have also received a formal preservation of evidence demand from a federal civil rights attorney representing Justice Desmond Caldwell." Mitchell's stomach did a sickening flip. "Federal. I read your preliminary notes, Mitchell," Chief Miller said, nodding toward the paper on the table. "You're claiming the suspect reached for a weapon. You're claiming he refused to identify himself." "He did," Mitchell lied, his voice rising in a desperate pitch. "He was being evasive. He wouldn't answer my questions." "I feared for my safety, Chief." "That's training," Captain Davies sighed, a sound of absolute disgust. He tapped the screen of the tablet. "Mitchell, are you familiar with the 2025 BMW 7 Series?" Mitchell blinked, derailed by the question. "I what?" "I know it's a luxury car. It is a highly sophisticated piece of machinery," Davies explained coldly. "It features a 360-degree surround view camera system. Specifically, it has an incident recorder that continuously loops high-definition video from the front, rear, and both side mirrors. Furthermore, because Justice Caldwell is a high-ranking state official, his vehicle is equipped with a secure, cloud-synced internal cabin microphone and camera for security purposes." The remaining blood drained from Mitchell's face. He felt as though the floor had suddenly turned to liquid. "Justice Caldwell's legal team has already provided us with the cloud link," Davies continued relentlessly. "We have multiple angles of the stop. We have crystal clear audio of the interior of his car. We heard him state perfectly calmly that he was reaching for his wallet. We heard you mock his profession. We watched you assault an elderly man who was fully complying with your orders." Chief Miller leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the trembling rookie. "You didn't just profile a black man in a wealthy neighborhood, Bradley. You lied on an official police communication. You fabricated probable cause. You committed battery. And right now," Miller pointed a thick finger at the incident report on the table, "you are attempting to commit perjury by filing a false police report." "Chief, please," Mitchell choked out, tears of sheer panic finally spilling over his eyelashes. "I can fix this. I'll resign. I'll walk away right now. Just let me resign." "You don't get it, do you?" Miller said, his voice dropping into a register of pure, terrifying ice. "Resigning saves you from an administrative firing. It doesn't save you from a grand jury. Justice Caldwell isn't looking for an apology. He's looking to make an example. He wants a federal civil rights investigation into this entire precinct, and he is using you as Exhibit A." Davies picked up the tablet. "Your employment with this department is terminated, effective immediately. Your police certification has been suspended, pending review by the state board. The district attorney is currently drafting warrants for official misconduct, false imprisonment, and aggravated battery." Mitchell slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, releasing a pathetic, suffocating sob. The illusion of his power, the shield of his badge, had been entirely stripped away. The crushing weight of his own arrogance had finally come crashing down on him. Karma had not just knocked on his door, it had kicked it off the hinges. "Stand up, Mr. Mitchell," Captain Davies ordered, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his back pocket. Click, click, click. The sound was identical to the one Mitchell had produced on the side of the road just hours prior. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the cold steel bit into Mitchell's own wrists, securing him in the exact same manner he had secured the man who would now systematically dismantle his life. Chief Miller turned off the light switch, leaving the disgraced officer in the sterile, unforgiving glow of the hallway. The United States District Court for the Northern District was a cavernous room of polished mahogany, echoing acoustics, and somber, unyielding authority. 6 months had passed since the incident at Elmwood and Crestview. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was a deafening roar. High-profile civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump had joined Justice Caldwell's legal advisory team, turning the localized incident into a national flashpoint regarding police conduct, racial profiling, and accountability. Inside the courtroom, however, the atmosphere was suffocatingly quiet. Bradley Mitchell sat at the defense table. The arrogant, swaggering patrolman from the midnight shift was gone. In his place sat a hollowed-out, pale 26-year-old wearing an ill-fitting gray suit. He had lost 15 pounds. His hands trembled perpetually, hidden beneath the heavy oak table. He was facing federal charges for the deprivation of rights under color of law, alongside state charges for aggravated battery and perjury. The prosecution did not need to paint a narrative. The evidence did it for them. The turning point of the trial came on the second day, when the prosecution played the footage recovered from the BMW's internal and external cloud-synced dashcams. The large, flat-screen monitors in the courtroom flickered to life. The jury watched in high definition as Mitchell's cruiser aggressively tailed the luxury sedan. They heard the crystal-clear audio of Mitchell's hostile, mocking tone. They heard Desmond Caldwell's polite, perfectly measured responses. Then came the physical assault. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery as the video showed Mitchell violently spinning the 62-year-old Supreme Court justice against the side of the vehicle, forcefully kicking his legs apart and ratcheting the steel handcuffs down with vicious, unnecessary force. The sheer brutality of the unprovoked attack, contrasted with the quiet elegance of the victim, was deeply uncomfortable to witness. Mitchell squeezed his eyes shut. He couldn't bear to look at the monitors. He could feel the jury's absolute disgust radiating toward him like heat from a furnace. When the prosecution called their star witness, the courtroom fell into a pin-drop silence. Desmond T. Caldwell walked through the heavy wooden doors, wearing a flawless navy blue suit. He did not look like a victim. He moved with the undeniable gravitas of a man who had spent his life commanding respect through intellect and integrity. He took the stand, swore the oath, and looked directly at the jury. The prosecuting attorney, a sharp federal litigator named Harrison Sterling, walked to the podium. "Justice Caldwell, can you describe your emotional state when the defendant ordered you out of your vehicle?" "I was acutely aware," Desmond began, his gravelly baritone easily filling the massive room, that my life was entirely in the hands of an armed, highly agitated individual who had completely abandoned his training and the constraints of the Constitution. I knew that any sudden movement, any expression of the anger I rightly felt, could be used as a lethal justification. I was terrified, Mr. Sterling, but I refused to let him see it. Mitchell's defense attorney, a weary public defender who knew he was fighting a losing battle, stood up for cross-examination. He tried the only desperate angle he had left. Justice Caldwell, the defense attorney started gently, is it not possible that in the dark, my client simply made a split-second, honest mistake? That he truly believed you matched the profile of the car thieves they were hunting? Desmond shifted his gaze from the lawyer to Bradley Mitchell. The eye contact was devastating. Mitchell visibly shrank in his chair. An honest mistake is turning down the wrong street, Desmond replied, his voice devoid of anger but heavy with absolute, crushing finality. Lying about a suspect reaching for a weapon is not a mistake. Fabricating probable cause is not a mistake. Mocking a citizen's dignity because you believe your badge grants you immunity is not a mistake. It is a choice. Officer Mitchell looked at me, saw a black man driving a car he believed I had no right to own, and chose to become a predator. There were no further questions. The defense rested without calling a single witness. Bradley Mitchell did not take the stand to defend himself. There was simply nothing left to defend. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the foreperson stood to read the verdict, the tension in the room snapped like a tightrope. Guilty on all counts: deprivation of civil rights, aggravated battery, filing a false police report. United States District Judge William H. Pryor, a notoriously strict jurist, leaned over the bench to deliver the sentencing. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Pryor said, his voice ringing like a blacksmith's hammer, "you were given a badge and a gun to protect the public. Instead, you used them to terrorize a citizen to soothe your own fragile ego. You disgraced your uniform, your department, and the very concept of the law. I sentence you to 48 months in a federal penitentiary, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release." A choked sob escaped Mitchell's throat. A federal marshal stepped forward, grabbing Mitchell by the arms. For the second time in 6 months, Mitchell felt the cold, unforgiving bite of steel handcuffs clamping down on his wrists. The poetic justice of the metallic click, click, click echoing in the silent courtroom was not lost on anyone. He was led away through the side door. His life, his career, and his freedom entirely destroyed by his own hubris. Desmond Caldwell did not celebrate. He merely stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked out of the courtroom. The subsequent civil lawsuit against the police department resulted in a massive, multi-million-dollar settlement. Desmond did not keep a single penny. He used the entirety of the funds to establish the Caldwell Decree, a mandatory, statewide de-escalation and constitutional rights training program for every graduating police cadet, fundamentally altering the landscape of local law enforcement. He took his trauma and forged it into a weapon for the greater good. And every night, when he drove home to Magnolia Estates, the patrol cars on the street gave him a wide, deeply respectful berth. The badge is a shield for the vulnerable, never a sword for the arrogant. Bradley Mitchell learned too late that true authority requires respect, not intimidation. Justice Desmond Caldwell transformed a moment of profound indignity into a powerful catalyst for systemic reform, proving that while prejudice might patrol the midnight streets, the long, unyielding arc of the law will always rise to deliver the ultimate, inevitable final word.